This is Quilters Grid, and I'm going to use it in a very different way to the way you might have seen it used before, which was cutting out a series of little squares, laying it on top, and then sewing them together. This is log cabin using Quilters Grid. And not only is it log cabin using Quilters Grid, but it's Quilt-As-You-Go because I've got wadding on the back. A magical way of using Quilters Grid. Just sit along and watch. I have cut a 9-inch piece of Quilters Grid. Added an extra ½ inch round the outside edge. That just makes life slightly easier when I come to trim it. I'm going to put this onto wadding, and I'm using the bamboo wadding. It's a lovely wadding. Lay the Quilters Grid onto the wadding with obviously the bonded side, the glue side, onto the wadding. You're now going to press it in place. Pressing that underneath, and then I suggest you use the iron-on press cloth. Damp it. Lay it on top of the Quilters Grid and the wadding. Take the iron, which you've set to between 2 to 3 dots, and just press all the layers together. The heat of the iron will gently steam and fuse the Quilters Grid to the batting or wadding, call it what you will. So first of all, before you go any further, bond the layers together, because this is going to give you the sort of Quilt-As-You-Go type effect. So bond it on, about sort of 15 seconds or thereabouts. Press it, and remember you're pressing it, not ironing it. Just about finished. And look, it's all beautifully bonded together. Now let it cool, because it needs to cool to fully stabilize and stick together. While it's cooling, you could be cutting the pieces that you're going to need. We want a 3-inch square for the middle, and we want some 1.5-inch strips in your chosen colors. I've chosen to use cream and orange, and this is going to make one of the blocks on the quilt you can see in front of me, all ready together onto the wadding on the back. So allow this to cool. Once you've got it cool, cut your various pieces and we'll go to the machine. I've pinned my 3-inch square in the middle of the Quilters Grid. Cut my 1.5-inch strips in the 2 colours, and I'm going to stitch the strips on in the usual log cabin style using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You will find, if you use this particular foot, the 1/4 inch foot, that the flange sticking out there can be a bit of a problem. I suggest if you must use a 1/4 inch foot, you have a foot something like this little one that doesn't have that sticking out flange. Do be careful when you use any 1/4 inch foot, designated one, because there's a single hole in the middle, and dare you to move the needle, you're going to have a problem because it'll hit the foot and break. What I choose to do and prefer is to have the ordinary foot on, the normal, the standard foot, and move the needle to a 1/4 inch from this edge of the presser foot. And I do it with the stitch width button and shift the needle over to 5.4. This puts the needle at a 1/4 inch from this edge of the presser foot. Starting off with, in my case, the cream. Make sure you cut any selvage off the end, and you're going to lay the cream right side down onto that central black square. Press the foot down, and you're going to sew from one end to the other. Sew a couple of stitches, stop and trim the cream to match the black underneath. Just trim straight away across there. When you get down to the bottom, raise the presser foot, turn the work round sideways, turning it a 1/4 turn going anti-clockwise, open out and fold back. And amazingly, your strip will now touch one of the lines on the Quilters Grid. Same colour, because it's L for log cabin. You're doing L's in each colour. I would suggest when you do it, don't use a thread that is such a contrast. I would use thread that match my fabric. Start on the edge, sew down a little bit, trim the fabric off. Right the way down. When you get to the bottom, raise the presser foot, take the needle out, fold the fabric back, and there is your first L for log cabin. I'm going to use the second colour now. If it's got a little selvage on it, trim the selvage off. Exactly the same technique. Fabric goes right from one end to the other. underneath the presser foot. There's no need to cut the threads. Just make sure you pull it out far enough so the threads don't get entangled. So down a little way, trim off, down to the bottom, raise the presser foot and the needle, fold the fabric back. The next strip I use will be orange again, thinking about the L's for log cabins. So along there, and all the time you're keeping it wonderfully straight because you're working to the lines on the quilter's grid. And we have it on the wadding, so it's quilting it down at the same time. Starting on the edge there, sew down a short way, and remember to trim off before you get to the base, because otherwise it gets awkward. Right, so there's the orange colour. When you get to the bottom, stop, exactly the same thing, fold the fabric back to the cream again, and I'm going to do a cream one along here, and then I'll do a cream there, orange, orange, cream, cream, orange, orange. You're always doing elf log cabin, and you keep going until you've covered the piece of quilter's grid. So having continued until I got to the last whole squares on the quilter's grid, I've sewn round the edge with a long stitch. Now bear in mind, you could do this any size you like. Just cut your quilter's grid the correct size plus a little bit extra. So if you happen to want a 9-inch block, then you're going to cut approximately an 11-inch square of the quilter's grid and then just trim it back a fraction. But you could make it any size you happen to fancy. Once you've completed, then just trim off the excess pieces. And the reason for leaving a little bit extra around the edge was it gave you a good guide to trim it off so it was absolutely 100% accurate. So put your ruler on the lines that you can see of the quilter's grid and just cut. Now, of course, you can make this much bigger or you can make it much smaller, and you can do all the usual log cabin designs with it. You can do your barn raising, straight furrows, streak of lightning, etc., etc. And the lovely thing about it is, as we pressed it onto wadding, you've already got it as Quilt-As-You-Go, because all you have to do then is put a back on it and it's quilted down just right for using as a bag front, a table mat, a block on a quilt. There it all is. If when you do turn it over, you might want to just tidy up some of the threads where you can see we've moved with the sewing machine and jump to the next piece. You of course won't use black because you'll have stitched with fabric, or sorry, with thread that matches your fabrics. So there you have Quilter's Grid Log Cabin.